Today's video is a church crawl south of York. We're heading through the South Ainsty area from the village of Bolton Percy down to Cotmanthorpe on the outskirts of York. We're going to take in a medieval church at the start and a medieval church at the end, and there's plenty to see in between, including the site of Nun Appleton Priory. There might not be much to see, but we'll walk past. But let's begin at Bolton Percy.
Bolton Percy, situated 4 miles east of Tadcaster, is an important village historically, as it was the centre of a large parish and served a large part of the South Ainsty near the rivers Ouse and Wharfe. The size of the parish meant that it was always a valuable living because the vicar could claim tithes from a large number of people across a wide area. Today there are a number of very old tracks which can still be travelled on foot, the remains of an old network of paths connecting this rural parochial landscape. At the administrative heart of the parish stood All Saints Parish Church, a handsome and spacious building of the 15th century Perpendicular Gothic style and of a suitable quality to match the grand urban churches lining the streets of York city centre. But at one time, All Saints Church ministered a great area of countryside, serving the residents of neighbouring villages which now have their own churches. Although evidence suggests the presence of an earlier church on this site, it is to the Perpendicular Gothic period and later restorations that most of the structure and late medieval stained glass in the chancel dates. However, the church is especially memorable for its 17th and 18th century furnishings and fittings. There is a complete set of 17th century box pews, as well as a 17th century communion table, font cover, the original pulpit, which is now a reader's desk, a replacement early 18th century pulpit, and more. All Saints Church was at the centre of a well-documented pew dispute in the late 16th century, which you can read more about on the church's website.
Well, I just passed a very nice lady walking her dog out of Bolton Percy, and I asked her, is Nun Appleton Hall currently occupied? Does anybody live there? And can you get anywhere near it? She said it is owned by somebody nowadays, by Humphrey Smith no less, the current owner of Sam Smith's Brewery. Bit of a controversial figure, particularly if you like your old boozers, which I do. Unfortunately, she said he's put fences up around the whole thing. So it clearly needs some repair, but she says unfortunately you can't really get anywhere near it. You can get close to somewhere called the Red Lodge, which is the old sort of, caretaker's lodge from the old estate. And there used to be bridleways and footpaths getting you closer to the 18th century hall, but he's fenced those off, so now you can't really get close to it. So we'll see how close we can get and then just head up to Appleton Roebuck, which is the next village in the walk.
To the south of Bolton Percy and Appleton Roebuck, by the banks of the River Wharfe, stood Nun Appleton Priory, a nunnery throughout the Middle Ages and subsequently the estate of the Fairfax family, with Sir Thomas Fairfax, the great parliamentary general, who rebuilt the house in the late 17th century. The house was abandoned and semi-derelict for many years until it was recently purchased. There are plenty of videos on YouTube from around 2015 and 2016 showing people trespassing to explore the grounds and the building interior prior to restorations, which are apparently now underway as of 2024.
So this is Oak Avenue. About as close as we're going to get at the end of this track to Nun Appleton Hall. But what I wanted to tell you about is that this place was renowned at least 100 years ago, and going back even further, for its giant oaks. In particular, one oak which is known variously as Lady Milner's Oak or the Post Office Oak. Lady Milner was a one-time resident after the Fairfaxes, I believe, of Nun Appleton Hall, and the hollowed out trunk or a bit of the oak, one particular oak, was used as a drop box for post and letters and mail that she would receive and the house would receive. Unfortunately, this avenue doesn't look to have any giant oaks left. There may be some further into the estate, but I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see those, which is a shame. But it's a beautiful area, and 100 years ago, very rural, still very rural and peaceful and isolated around here. Well, the lady I spoke to earlier wasn't joking. The Appleton estate, so the immediate estate surrounding the house, is surrounded by an at least 7-foot high barbed wire fence, which is also an electric fence, and it has CCTV on it. Okay, Humphrey. Anyway, now we're heading up to Appleton Roebuck. We've just passed a place called Holm Green, immediately south of Appleton Roebuck, and spotted a timber-framed building in the distance, and checked the Historic England listing map, and in Holm Green, that building which is there, and I couldn't see a name for it, is not listed. So I assume it either was missed in a survey a few decades ago, or it was, considered to be a modern pastiche. But there's some buildings down there which are, but I haven't gone down to see those. Well, this is the worst time of year to go for a walk, but I'm determined to do it. It's incredibly overcast, a horrible start to the year. There's no sunshine or any break in the clouds forecast for the next week at least. It's muddy underfoot, the rivers are flooded up north. In fact, the bus driver on the number 21 bus that I got here today from York told me not to go too close to the River Wharf because of the flooding. And he's not wrong. I mean, I've seen all the photos online, but this walk is going to take me north and east, so I'm heading away from those major rivers. Immediately southeast of Appleton Roebuck, you stumble across these earthworks here. They are vast, they're enormous, and so deep. It's a double-moated site, which would have been founded in the 12th century, and at the centre have had a timbered house, so the South Ainsty Archaeological Society say on their website. It's gigantic though, I can't stress how big this site is, and it's so little known. It's only marked in the sort of Gothic italic text on the OS map, and there's a little bit of information about it online, but if you didn't know it was here, you would pass it by. You could live here for decades and not know it was here unless you were walking your dog and then out of curiosity went online or in a book in the library and looked this site up. It was called Brocket Hall. I'm not entirely sure who that served or what function it served, but what a thing to have stumbled across. And now let's head into Appleton Roebuck.
Appleton Roebuck is a simple village built largely along one street and was the principal settlement of the area, although it didn't get its own church until 1868 and only separated from the parish of Bolton Percy in 1875. The nearby villages of Colton and Steeton, however, through which we pass later on this walk, remained part of the parish of Bolton Percy. Some of the tracks and villages in today's walk are featured in this little guidebook, which I picked up for £2 in a charity shop in York. It's called Walks in the Vale of York, and it was published in 1977 by the York Group of the Ramblers Association. It's a handy little guide that I've used over the past couple of years. It describes Appleton Roebuck as boasting not many distinguished buildings, but I looked a little bit deeper into this, and if you go onto Historic England's website, it was only a year later that a lot of these buildings in the village were beginning to be listed. So in 1977, when this was written, there were no listed buildings. A year later, there was the Wesleyan Methodist Church, a couple of houses, and this building, All Saints Church, which is not open today. A decade later, more buildings in the village in 88 got listed, and then in the 2000s, the War Memorial just outside the front of this church. But I do agree to an extent, there are no real points of interest apart from that fantastic moated site, the earthworks of Brocket Hall. So we'll head on to the next stop, which is Colton. After crossing the railway line on the way to Colton, I'm aware that I could go and see the site of Steeton Medieval Village. There's nothing there now, just some earthworks.
But I'm not going to do that today because it is quite cold and miserable, and it is a nice peaceful walk. But I'm going to go and see the late 19th century church in Colton, and then just head to Cotmanthorpe and show you that medieval church there, or what survives of it.
St Paul's Church in Colton is not a listed building. Perhaps it's just my personal preference, but this single-cell church, faced of red brick with no stone dressings, keeping everything relatively monochrome with a little wooden spirelet, is 10 times as striking, in my opinion, as the rather uninspiring external appearance of All Saints' Church in Appleton, Roebuck. The church was designed by York architect Walter Briley and his colleague James Demain in 1899, although a date stone on the church says 1897. Parishioners previously attended All Saints' Church in Bolton Percy for services until its own construction at the end of the 19th century, which would have saved them a considerable journey. Cotmanthorpe is situated about 4 miles southwest of York and immediately south of the A64. It has grown over the years from a small farming community to the large, thriving and bustling village that it now is. We enter Cotmanthorpe on today's walk along what is probably the oldest subject of historical interest in the village. This is the Roman road, which was part of the highway running from York to Tadcaster, where it joined the main Roman road, Ermine Street, from Lincoln through Doncaster, Castleford, Aldborough and to the north of England. St Giles' Church dates to the 12th century, and the design is peculiar to the district, with churches of 12th century dates at nearby villages Askham Bryan, Askham Richard and Bilton in Ainsty, for example, all also of similar form and style. Nowadays, the resemblance of St Giles to its neighbours is no longer completely apparent, since more recent access improvements and an extension have altered its character and its overall footprint. Although St Giles was built in the 12th century, it did not become a parish in its own right until 1866. Prior to this, it was a chapel of ease and chapelry of St Mary's Bishop Hill Jr. in York city centre. Before changes to the fabric made in the 20th century, the medieval church was partially rebuilt and refurnished in the late 19th century. The main architectural feature is the round arched doorway at the west end of the present nave. The pews have been removed and replaced with upholstered chairs, forming part of what is clearly a very well-used worship and community space. There are also some interesting monuments in the sanctuary, and Victorian and more modern stained glass, all worth a look.
And here ends the walk at St Giles' Church in Cotmanthorpe. Unfortunately, the church isn't open today, but I have been in before, so I can pop some pictures into the end of the video with. And thank you for joining me, and I hope you like and subscribe for more church crawling videos in Yorkshire.